Breaking news from the Associated Press. Pete Hegseth says another strike in the Caribbean targets alleged drug running boat killing 6. Even as the president deals, I've said this before, with Russia, Ukraine, Middle East, and China, even and the tariffs around the world, this is the largest change in American policy towards Latin America since Roosevelt, or at least in my lifetime. I mean, there's never been an administration engaged bilaterally with so many people in the country, in these Latin American countries, and it's hard to keep track. Every day stuff happens. But here's one thing that, and we haven't talked about it enough here. Here's one thing that's going on that is definitely worth talking about. 112, which is the president's aggressive posture towards Venezuela. And Congress, which laughably every so often likes to pretend it's a co-equal branch, is upset that the president thinks he can just have undeclared wars. Senate GOP chair declines hearings on Trump's boat attacks off Venezuela. Democrats and some Republicans, like Rand Paul, are saying, Mr. President, you can't just go to war with Latin American countries without a little check-in with us. Dan, where does this stand? Not just Venezuela, but the president's overall Latin America overhaul.
Well, I mean, part of this is we don't know, and the reason that I think this is important is we talk a lot about off-the-record Republicans complain. This is an issue where the White House has gone to brief in private and classified briefings. Both parties, a lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats, come out saying they're not telling us anything. They're being, pretty silent on a lot of details. And they won't even, they're so afraid of Trump, they won't hold a public hearing. I mean, whether you agree or disagree, there ought to be a public airing of who we're targeting, providing, more information. What is the bigger play here? What are we trying to achieve? Because Trump made a comment offhand yesterday that we're now going to start doing this on land. And that is, forget international waters. It sounds like we're now going into Venezuela or possibly Colombia and start targeting people. That he's talked about going into Mexico. There ought to at least be a public discussion about this.
Just quick point of clarification. Thanks to Dave. I do read the chat. Doug Ford is the premier of Ontario. The mayor was his late brother, Rob. So I apologize for my failure to fully.
That's okay. That's okay. Brett Baer said the other night that Chris Sununu was running for Senate. So
well, that's a whole separate.
Yeah.
But I got my Ford family Ontario positions mixed up.
My point is even if Brett can make such a mistake, humans can't too.
Thank you. So look, I think that as I've said before, I've looked into this. There's a big difference between preemptive strikes, and history is replete with them going back to the beginning of our country, with preventive strikes to stop, a variety of threats entering our country. There's a big difference between that and what Dan was saying when the president did allude to going into a country, right? That's a very different thing, and obviously requires a much different legal analysis. So we'll get to that if that were to happen. I will say, just going back to that headline from Axios, can we just put that back up for 1 sec, please? Like, this is a BS headline. Jim Risch of Idaho is the chairman. They went and asked him, "Are you having hearings?" And he said, "I have nothing scheduled." He didn't decline. He's the chairman. He sets the agenda. He sets them. Because you get asked a question, that's one of the most misleading headlines in Axios.
Well, no, the Democrats have asked him to have hearings, and he's declined.
So what? But do you know what Republicans asked? This is
but this isn't, Sean. This is a big deal.
But I mean, no. This is Axios creating fake news. The chairman decides the schedule, and if they want to play this game, then every time.
Sean, there's so many examples of fake news. This is not one of them. So many.
Okay, well, it is, because the idea that if we're going to play that game, then every time someone asks a Democrat to do something they don't, the headline should be Pelosi declines to do this, or Jeffries declines, and that's not how it works. The only reason Axios wrote that is because they are a left-leaning publication. That was BS. And that's why people hate journalism.
They say that something that's easy is like a walk in the park. Well, easier than a walk in the park, hit the subscribe button, be part of the two-way community, never miss an episode, be part of our conversations. Thank you for your service to America.
And don't forget, you can now listen to the morning meeting and two-way tonight on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.